The fog rolled in thick off the San Francisco Bay that Tuesday morning, wrapping Oakland's streets in a shroud of gray that swallowed sound and light alike. Telegraph Avenue lay quiet beneath the mist, its storefronts still dark, its sidewalks empty, save for the occasional early commuter hurrying toward the BART station, with collar turned up against the chill. It was the kind of morning that made a man feel invisible, the kind that seeped into bones and settled there like an old ache that never quite went away. Garrett Brennan felt every one of his 42 years as he guided his Harley-Davidson Road King through the murky streets. The engine's rumble was a familiar comfort, steady as a heartbeat after 23 years of riding. Chrome gleamed dull in the diffused light. Exhaust vapor mingled with the fog and disappeared. He pulled into the parking lot of Rosie's Diner at exactly 7:15, same as he had every Tuesday morning for the past 15 years. The tires crunched over cracked asphalt still wet from yesterday's rain. Puddles reflected the gray sky like broken mirrors scattered across the pavement. Garrett killed the engine and swung his leg over the seat. His leather boots hit the ground with a solid thud. He stood for a moment, rolling his shoulders against the morning stiffness, feeling the familiar weight of his cut settle across his back. The leather vest was weathered from 2 decades of road dust and rain. The patches told a story that most people couldn't read and wouldn't want to understand. Hell's Angels Oakland. The winged death's head emblem rode proud between his shoulder blades, unmistakable to anyone who knew what it meant. And everyone knew what it meant. Tattoos crawled up both his forearms beneath the pushed-up sleeves of his flannel shirt. Faded ink marking moments he rarely talked about anymore. A skull wreathed in flames on his left arm, his brother's initials and death date on his right. Prison-style lettering across his knuckles that spelled out words he'd chosen at 20 years old when he thought he understood what forever meant. His beard had gone gray at the edges in recent years, though he kept it neatly trimmed. The lines around his eyes had deepened, but it was the eyes themselves that had changed the most. They held a weariness that had nothing to do with the early hour, the accumulated weight of too many funerals, too many friends behind bars, too many years of being looked at like a monster. Garrett pushed through the diner's glass door. The bell chimed overhead, bright and ordinary, completely at odds with what happened next. The warmth hit him first, then the smell of bacon grease and burnt coffee and maple syrup. Then the silence. It didn't fall all at once. Conversations lowered first, then stopped. Forks paused midway to mouths. A coffee cup clinked against a saucer with sudden loudness. Even the kitchen noise seemed to dim, as if the cook had turned to peer through the service window. Garrett was used to it, had been used to it for longer than he could remember. The way people's eyes cut toward him and then quickly away. The way shoulders tensed. The way mothers instinctively reached for their children. A young woman with a toddler in a high chair gathered her purse closer to her body, as if his presence might somehow contaminate her belongings. An elderly man at the counter turned his back with deliberate slowness. 2 teenage boys in a corner booth exchanged nervous glances and suddenly became very interested in their phones. The girl behind the register couldn't have been more than 19. Her hand hovered near the phone mounted on the wall, fingers twitching like she might need to call someone. Her name tag read Ashley. Her expression read terrified. Garrett walked to the counter with measured steps. He'd learned long ago that moving slowly was better than moving fast. Fast made people panic. Slow just made them nervous. His presence seemed to take up more space than his actual size, which was considerable. 6'2", 230 pounds, most of it still muscle despite the years. But it wasn't his physical dimensions that filled the room. It was what he represented. The unknown, the dangerous. Everything polite society taught people to fear. "Large black coffee," he said to Ashley. His voice came out gravelly from years of wind and road dust and cigarette smoke he'd given up a decade ago, but whose damage remained. "To go." "375, she said without meeting his eyes, her voice barely above a whisper. Garrett reached for his wallet. The leather was worn smooth from years of handling, same as everything he owned. He pulled out a $5 bill, and that's when he noticed her. The little girl sat alone in a corner booth near the window, so small her feet dangled a good 6 inches above the floor. She couldn't have been more than 8 years old, with tangled blonde hair that looked like it hadn't seen a brush in several days. Not dirty exactly, just unkempt in the way of children whose caregivers were too exhausted to manage the details. Her clothes told a story Garrett recognized. Clean but worn, a faded pink sweatshirt with a small stain on the sleeve that wouldn't come out no matter how many times it was washed. Jeans that were slightly too short, bought during a growth spurt that had continued past the budget's ability to keep up. Sneakers with the brand name rubbed off, held together more by hope than by structural integrity. She had a glass of water in front of her. Nothing else, no food, no juice, no hot chocolate on a cold morning. Just water. But she wasn't looking at the water. She was looking directly at Garrett. He felt the weight of her gaze like a physical thing. Blue eyes wide and clear, watching him with an expression he couldn't immediately identify. It wasn't fear. Everyone else in the diner was afraid of him, but this skinny little girl in her worn-out clothes showed no trace of it. It wasn't judgment either. She wasn't looking at him the way the adults did, cataloging his tattoos and leather and drawing conclusions about his character. She was simply looking at him, really looking, as if she was trying to see past the surface to whatever lay beneath. Their eyes met across the diner's worn linoleum floor, and she smiled. Not a nervous smile or a polite smile, or the kind of awkward grimace people sometimes offered when caught staring. This was a genuine smile, gap-toothed where she'd recently lost a baby tooth, warm in a way that transformed her thin face into something almost luminous. Garrett felt something shift in his chest, a sensation he couldn't name and hadn't felt in longer than he could remember. When was the last time someone had smiled at him like that, like he was just a person, like his clothes and his ink and his reputation were invisible, and all that remained was a man who might need a smile on a foggy Tuesday morning? He nodded slightly in acknowledgement, then turned back to Ashley to complete his transaction. The girl's hands shook as she counted his change. She practically threw the coins at him to avoid any possibility of contact. Garrett pocketed the money without comment the way he always did. The way he'd learned to do years ago when he realized that making a scene about mistreatment only made things worse. He moved to the pickup area to wait for his coffee. The ancient machine behind the counter hissed and gurgled. Someone in the kitchen dropped a pan with a clatter that made Ashley jump. Then Garrett heard footsteps behind him. Small footsteps. The soft scuff of worn sneakers on linoleum. "Excuse me, mister." He turned. The little girl stood there. She'd slid out of her booth and crossed the entire diner to approach him, seemingly oblivious to the horrified stares of every adult in the room. The young mother with the toddler looked like she might faint. The elderly man at the counter had turned around again, his face pale. Up close, Garrett could see that she was thinner than she should be. Her cheekbones stood out too prominently. Her wrists were like twigs poking out from the stretched cuffs of her sweatshirt. There were faint shadows under her eyes that suggested sleep didn't come easily or often enough. But those eyes themselves were bright with something he couldn't quite name. Intelligence, determination, and something that looked almost like kindness directed at him. At him of all people. "Yeah," Garrett said, moderating his voice unconsciously, making it softer than he usually bothered to. She held out her hand. In her small fist was a crumpled dollar bill clutched so tight her knuckles had gone white. "I heard her say your coffee was $3.75. Her voice was quiet but steady. "I only have $1, but I wanted to help pay for it." Garrett stared at the money, then at the girl, then at the money again. "Because you look like you might need something warm today." She continued as if this explained everything. As if offering her money to a Hell's Angel twice her size was the most natural thing in the world. "It's cold outside." The diner had gone completely silent. Not the nervous quiet from before, but something deeper. Absolute stillness. Garrett could feel every eye in the place fixed on this moment, watching to see what the dangerous biker would do when confronted by an 8-year-old with $1. Ashley had stopped mid-pour the coffee pot suspended in the air. The young mother had risen half out of her seat, as if preparing to throw herself between her child and whatever violence might erupt. The elderly man's mouth hung open. Garrett looked at the crumpled bill in the girl's hand. It was soft with wear, the kind of soft that came from being folded and unfolded hundreds of times, from being counted and recounted, from being all that stood between someone and nothing at all. "That's your dollar?" he asked quietly. She nodded. "All of it, that's all you have." Another nod, no hesitation, no second thoughts. "I was saving it," she said, "but She shrugged a gesture far too adult for her years, far too familiar with disappointment and diminished expectations. I think you need it more. For the coffee. The twist in Garrett's chest sharpened into something almost painful. He'd seen poverty before. Hell, he'd lived it. Grown up in a house where the electricity got shut off more often than not, where dinner was whatever could be scrounged from a nearly empty refrigerator, where new clothes meant someone else's cast-offs from the church donation bin. He recognized this girl, not her specifically, but everything she represented. The pride that kept her clothes clean even when there wasn't enough food. The maturity that came from learning too early that the world wasn't fair. The kindness that somehow survived despite everything that should have crushed it out of her. Your parents know you're giving away your money, he asked. Something flickered across her face. There and gone so fast most people would have missed it. But Garrett had spent 2 decades reading people figuring out who was dangerous and who was desperate, who was lying and who was telling a truth they wished they didn't have to tell. He saw all of that in her eyes for just a moment. I don't have parents anymore, she said. Her voice stayed steady, but the words cost her something. I live with my Aunt Marlene. The girl glanced toward the window toward the bus stop, visible through the glass where a yellow school bus would eventually appear. She's at work. I'm waiting for the school bus. The young mother slowly sat back down. The elderly man turned away again, but differently this time. Ashley set down the coffee pot with a soft click. Garrett felt that twist in his chest again, sharper now. He knew that look the girl wore. He'd worn it himself once a long time ago before the leather and the ink and the reputation. The look of a kid who'd learned too early that kindness was rare and had decided to offer it anyway. What's your name? He asked. Sadie. She stood a little straighter as if the name was something to be proud of. Sadie Mitchell. Well, Sadie Mitchell. Garrett reached into his pocket and pulled out his wallet again. He extracted a $20 bill and handed it to Ashley, whose eyes went wide. I appreciate the offer, I really do. But how about instead you let me buy you breakfast? He saw Sadie's expression shift through several emotions. Surprise, suspicion, hope, and then something that looked almost like disappointment. I wasn't trying to get free food, she said, her chin lifting. I was trying to help you. I know you were, and you did help me. Garrett found that he meant it, more than she could possibly understand. More than you know, but you can help me more by sitting down and ordering some food. When's the last time you ate? The question hung in the air between them. Sadie's eyes darted away, then back. Her jaw tightened. Yesterday, she whispered finally. Lunch at school. The words hit Garrett like a physical blow. He thought about the coffee he'd been about to buy, $3.75. A casual expense he wouldn't have thought twice about. Meanwhile, this child, this skinny 8-year-old with her crumpled dollar, hadn't eaten in nearly 24 hours. He thought about all the meals he'd taken for granted, all the times he'd complained about the food at the clubhouse, all the money he'd spent on things that didn't matter while kids like Sadie went hungry. Ashley, he said, his voice harder than he intended. He softened it deliberately. Whatever she wants for breakfast. Pancakes, eggs, bacon, the works. Add a large orange juice and a glass of milk, and keep the change. Ashley blinked at the 20 in her hand, then at Garrett, then at Sadie. Something shifted in her expression. The fear didn't disappear entirely, but it was joined by something else. Confusion, maybe, or the beginning of a recalculation. Yes, sir, she said. It was the first time she'd addressed him directly. Booth or counter? Garrett looked at Sadie. You're a booth, okay? The girl studied him for a long moment, weighing something, making a decision that seemed far too heavy for someone her age. Then she nodded a small, quick movement and turned to lead him across the diner. The other customers watched them go. Garrett could feel their stares like heat on his back. The dangerous biker and the little girl. He could imagine what they were thinking, the assumptions racing through their minds, the dark conclusions they were drawing. Let them think what they wanted. Sadie slid into her side of the booth, and Garrett settled into the opposite bench. The vinyl seats were cracked and patched with tape. The table was scarred with decades of use initials carved into the corners by long-forgotten teenagers. A small jukebox selector sat against the wall, dusty with disuse. It was the kind of booth where ordinary people had ordinary breakfasts, where families gathered on Sunday mornings, where young couples shared plates of French fries on first dates. Now it held a Hell's Angel and a hungry child, and somehow that felt more right than anything Garrett had experienced in years. "You like pancakes?" he asked. Sadie nodded enthusiastically, then seemed to catch herself as if too much eagerness might be unseemly. "Yes, sir." "Don't call me sir. Makes me feel old." He paused. "Older. Call me Garrett, or Mr. Garrett if your aunt would prefer." "Mr. Garrett," she repeated, trying it out. A small smile crossed her face. "That's a strong name, like a knight or something." "Never been called a knight before." "My Uncle Danny used to say names matter, that people grow into them." The smile faded slightly. "He had a strong name, too. Daniel, like the lion's den. Your uncle sounds like a smart man." "He was." Past tense delivered with that same steadiness she'd shown before. "He died last year. He was my mom's fiancé before she got sick. He served 2 tours overseas, came back different, but still kind. He had tattoos, too." She looked at Garrett's forearms, at the ink crawling across his skin. "That's why I'm not scared of you. Because your uncle had tattoos. Because Uncle Danny taught me that you can't tell who someone is just by looking at them. He looks scary to some people, big and covered in ink and real serious all the time. But he was the kindest person I ever knew." She paused. "Besides my mom." Garrett didn't ask about her mother. The past tense was clear enough. Dead like the uncle. This child had lost too many people already. "He sounds like he was a good man," Garrett said. "He was. He used to tell me stories about his army friends, his brothers he called them, said they'd do anything for each other." Sadie tilted her head, looking at Garrett's cut at the patches and pins. "You have brothers too, don't you?" "That's what the jacket means." Garrett was surprised by her perception. Most people just saw the death's head and stopped looking. Saw the words Hell's Angels and made their judgments. "Yeah," he said, "I have brothers." "That's good. Everyone needs brothers." She said it with the certainty of someone who understood loneliness. "Or sisters. Or someone." The food arrived faster than Garrett expected. Donna Mercer, the middle-aged waitress, who'd been serving him coffee for 15 years without ever once making eye contact, approached the table with a loaded tray. She set down plates heaped with more food than Sadie could possibly eat. A stack of golden pancakes, scrambled eggs still steaming, a pile of crispy bacon, toast with butter and jelly, a glass of orange juice so full it threatened to overflow, a tall glass of cold milk. "Thank you," Sadie breathed, her eyes wide. For the first time in 15 years, Donna Mercer looked directly at Garrett. Her expression was unreadable, but she gave him a small nod before walking away. That small nod felt like a crack in a wall he'd stopped trying to breach years ago. "This is so much food," Sadie said, staring at the plates like they might disappear if she blinked. "You're a growing kid. You need to eat." She picked up her fork, then hesitated. "My mom used to say we should always be grateful for food. She'd say a blessing before every meal, even when—" Sadie stopped, swallowed hard, then continued quietly. "Even when there wasn't much to bless. That sounds like a good tradition." Sadie bowed her head briefly, her lips moving without sound. Then she looked up and attacked the pancakes with the focused intensity of someone who didn't know when the next meal was coming. Garrett sipped his coffee and watched her eat. He felt something stirring in his chest that he hadn't felt in a very long time. A sense of purpose. A reason to care about something beyond the club and the bikes and the endless cycle of runs and meetings and petty territorial disputes. "Slow down," he said gently. "It's not going anywhere." Sadie paused, mid-bite, cheeks bulging comically with pancake. She chewed and swallowed before speaking. "Sorry, Aunt Marlene says I eat too fast." "Your aunt takes good care of you." The question was carefully neutral, but Garrett watched her response closely, looking for signs of the kinds of things that happen to kids when the adults in their lives failed them. Bruises, flinches, the carefully constructed lies of children protecting themselves from worse treatment. He didn't see any of that in Sadie. What he saw was a fierce, protective loyalty. "She tries really hard," Sadie said. "She works 2 jobs, at the fish cannery during the day and cleaning offices at night. Sometimes she's so tired she falls asleep at dinner." A pause. "When we have dinner. Not always enough food. There's always something. Aunt Marlene makes sure I eat even when she doesn't." The words came out defensive, as if Sadie was used to people judging her family. It's not her fault, it's just hard. Everything costs so much and the cannery doesn't pay enough. And then mom got sick and the hospital bills. She stopped abruptly, looked down at her plate, pushed a piece of pancake around with her fork. Your mom was sick for a while. Cancer, ovarian cancer. Sadie said the words with the clinical precision of a child who'd had to learn medical terminology too young. The doctors tried everything, but it had already spread. 11 months ago. That's when I came to live with Aunt Marlene. 11 months, not even a year. Garrett thought about all the grief that child must be carrying. The loss of her mother, the loss of Uncle Danny before that, the adjustment to a new home, the poverty that squeezed tighter every day. And still she'd approached a stranger with her last dollar because she thought he looked like he needed something warm. I'm sorry about your mom, he said. The words felt inadequate, but they were all he had. Me too. Sadie took another bite of pancake, chewing slowly this time. She was the best mom. Even when she was sick, she tried to make everything seem okay. She said worrying was her job, not mine. A small, sad smile. But I worried anyway. That's what kids do when they love their parents. Did you love your parents? The question caught Garrett off guard. He wasn't used to children asking him direct questions, wasn't used to children talking to him at all. My mom, he said after a moment. She passed when I was 16. My dad, he shook his head. He wasn't around much. So you know what it's like, being alone. Yeah, I know what it's like. Sadie nodded as if this confirmed something she'd suspected. That's why you look sad this morning. When you came in, I could see it in your eyes. That kind of sad that comes from being alone for too long. Garrett didn't know what to say. He'd spent decades building walls around himself, cultivating an image that kept people at a distance. And this 8-year-old girl had seen through all of it in 5 seconds. Is that why you offered me your dollar, he asked, because you thought I was so, partly, and because Uncle Danny always said that kindness was the only thing worth giving away. He said most people were too scared to be kind because they were afraid of looking weak. But being kind isn't weak. It's the strongest thing you can do. She looked at him with those clear blue eyes. You looked like you needed someone to be kind to you. The lump in Garrett's throat made it hard to speak. Your uncle was a wise man, he managed. He was the best. After Mom, he was the best person I knew. Sadie returned to her eggs, seeming to sense that Garrett needed a moment. He got hurt overseas. That's why he came home early. And then he got sick from something they used over there. Some kind of chemical exposure, the doctor said. He tried to fight it, but she shrugged, that same too-adult gesture. There's a lot of fighting you just can't win, she said quietly. Garrett thought about the members of his club who'd served, the ones who'd come back different, the ones who hadn't come back at all. He thought about the VA hospital where he volunteered twice a month fixing up bikes for veterans who'd lost limbs or mobility or hope. Your uncle sounds like he was a hero. He was, but he never said so. He said the real heroes were the ones who didn't come home. Sadie wiped her mouth with a napkin. He used to talk about his brothers from the army, said they'd do anything for each other. Look out for each other. He said that's what family really meant. Not blood, but choice. Choosing to care about someone and never giving up on them. The words hit close to home. Too close. Garrett thought about his own brothers in the club. The men who'd stood by him through arrests and trials and hospital stays. The family he'd built when his blood family had failed him. That's a good way to look at family, he said. Aunt Marlene chose me. Sadie said it simply as a statement of fact. She didn't have to take me in. She was barely making it on her own. But when Mom died, she never even hesitated. Just said, I was hers now, and that was that. A pause. Even though it makes everything harder for her. That's what family does. Yeah, Sadie had finished the pancakes and was working on the bacon now. She's not my mom. No one can be my mom. But she loves me. I can tell, even when she's too tired to show it. Outside the window, the fog was beginning to lift. Weak sunlight filtered through the gray, casting long shadows across the parking lot. The school bus would be coming soon. Can I ask you something? Sadie said. Sure. Why aren't people scared of me the way they're scared of you? Garrett blinked at the question. What do you mean? I mean, she gestured vaguely at herself, at her worn clothes and tangled hair. People look at me like I'm nothing, like I'm invisible. They don't see me at all, but they see you. They're scared of you. She tilted her head. Which is worse? It was such a profound question from such a small person that Garrett had to take a moment to consider it properly. I don't know, he admitted finally. I think they're both bad in different ways. Being invisible means people don't think you matter. Being scary means people think you're a monster. Neither one lets them see who you really are. Sadie nodded slowly. My mom used to say that everyone's fighting a battle you can't see. She said that's why you have to be kind to everyone, because you never know what they're going through. Your mom sounds like she was a special woman. She was. Sadie's eyes grew bright with unshed tears, but she blinked them back with practiced ease. She was the best. Sometimes I'm scared I'll forget what she looked like, what her voice sounded like. Aunt Marlene doesn't have many pictures, and we had to leave most of our stuff behind when she stopped, shook her head, took a long drink of orange juice. Anyway, she said, her voice deliberately lighter, I think you're not scary at all. I think you're sad and lonely and maybe a little tired, but not scary. You might be the only person in this diner who thinks that. Then they're not looking hard enough. Sadie fixed him with a gaze that felt far too old for her years. Mrs. Patterson, my teacher, she says you shouldn't judge a book by its cover. I think that means people too. Smart teacher. She's nice. The kids at school, they sometimes cross the street when they see people like you. People with motorcycles and tattoos. Sadie glanced out the window at Garrett's Harley Chrome gleaming in the strengthening light. But I think that's silly. Lots of people have tattoos. Uncle Danny had tattoos. It doesn't make them bad. No, Garrett agreed. It doesn't. The bell over the door chimed as a few more customers trickled in for the morning rush. They paused when they saw Garrett went through the same dance of fear and avoidance, then found seats as far from his booth as possible. Sadie watched them with a small frown. See, she said, they don't even know you, but they've already decided who you are. Most people make those kinds of decisions. That's not fair. No, but it's how the world works. Sadie considered this while she finished her bacon. I don't think I want to be part of a world that works like that, she said finally. I think I want to be part of making it better. The yellow school bus appeared at the corner, rumbling up Telegraph Avenue with its lights flashing. That's my bus, Sadie said, suddenly anxious. She started to slide out of the booth, then stopped, reached into her pocket, pulled out the crumpled dollar bill. No, Garrett said, that's yours, you keep it. It's not mine. Sadie set the dollar on the table between them, her small hand pressing it flat. It's for your coffee. That way we both helped each other. It's only fair. Sadie, I don't take charity. Her chin lifted, that fierce pride blazing in her eyes again. Uncle Danny taught me that too. Always pay your own way. Always give as much as you take. You bought me breakfast, which is amazing, and thank you so much. But I said I wanted to pay for your coffee, and I meant it. She met his eyes squarely. Please, let me keep my word. Garrett looked at the dollar, wrinkled and soft and worn down to almost nothing. Everything this child had in the world, and she was insisting on giving it to him. Not because she wanted something, not because she was trying to manipulate him, but because she'd made a promise, and keeping promises mattered to her. Because even in poverty, even in grief, even when she had nothing, she wanted to maintain her integrity. Okay, he said quietly. Okay, Sadie, I'll keep it. Her face broke into that gap-toothed grin, bright as the sun breaking through the Oakland fog. Thank you for breakfast, Mr. Garrett. It was the best breakfast I've had in, she stopped, reconsidered, in a really long time. You're welcome. Maybe I'll see you again sometime. I'm here every Tuesday, waiting for the bus. Garrett heard himself say, maybe you will. Sadie grabbed her backpack, an old thing with fraying straps and a faded cartoon character on the front. She started to turn away, then paused. Mr. Garrett, yeah, I hope you feel warmer now. She smiled at him one more time, and for just a moment, the whole diner seemed brighter. Everyone deserves to feel warm. Then she was gone. A small blur of pink and blonde racing for the door, her backpack bouncing against her thin shoulders. The bell chimed as she pushed through. Garrett watched through the window as she ran to the bus stop, as she climbed the big steps, as she found a seat and pressed her face against the glass. She waved at him. That same enthusiastic wave she'd probably given her mother once and her uncle and everyone she loved. Garrett raised his coffee cup in salute. The bus pulled away, taking Sadie Mitchell and her gap-toothed smile and her impossible kindness with it. The diner returned to its normal rhythms. Conversations resumed. Forks clinked against plates. The ordinary sounds of ordinary life. But something had shifted. Donna approached his table with the coffee pot, and for the first time in 15 years, she met his eyes directly. "That was a good thing you did," she said quietly. "That little girl, she's here every Tuesday. Just sits there with her water waiting. I've been meaning to, but things get busy and—" She stopped, looking ashamed. "You know her?" Garrett asked. "Not well. Her aunt comes in sometimes. Marlene Hartwell. Works at the cannery and cleans offices at night. She's doing her best, but—" Donna shrugged. "It's not enough, never is for people like that." "People like what?" "People who got dealt a bad hand and are just trying to survive." Donna refilled his coffee. "That little girl's mother died about a year ago. Cancer. Left nothing but medical bills and a kid who needed someone to take care of her. Marlene stepped up, but she was already drowning." Garrett picked up the crumpled dollar Sadie had left, smoothed it out on the table. $1. Everything she had, offered freely to a stranger because she thought he looked like he needed something warm. "What do I owe you?" he asked. The 20 covered it, more than covered it. Donna paused. "You want me to give her the change next time she comes in? There's about $15 there." Garrett thought about Sadie's face when she'd refused to take the dollar back. Her fierce insistence on paying her own way. Her pride worn thin as her clothes, but still intact. "No," he said. "I'll take care of it. Just—" He pulled a 50 from his wallet and set it on the table. "Make sure she gets fed if she's in here and I'm not. Don't tell her where it came from. She doesn't like charity." Donna looked at the 50, then at Garrett. Something in her expression shifted, some long-held assumption crumbling at the edges. "You're not what I expected," she said. "Most people aren't." "No, I suppose they're not." She picked up the bill and tucked it into her apron. "I'll take care of her, Mr. Brennan. I should have been doing it all along." After she walked away, Garrett sat alone with his cooling coffee and the crumpled dollar bill still smoothed flat on the table before him. He looked at it for a long time, thinking about the last time someone had shown him kindness without wanting something in return. He couldn't remember, not in the club where loyalty was fierce but transactional, not in his dealings with the outside world where every interaction was colored by what people thought he was, not even in the blurred years before the leather and the ink when he'd been young enough to believe that the world might be fair. But today an 8-year-old girl with nothing had given him everything she had, not because she had to, not because she expected anything back, just because she was someone who looked cold and lonely and sour, and she wanted to help. Garrett folded the dollar carefully. Once, twice, 3 times. He reached into his wallet and pulled out an old photograph, creased and faded from years of being carried close to his heart. His brother Jimmy, 19 years old, forever frozen in time by a drunk driver on a rain-slicked highway. Jimmy had been the good one, the one who saw the best in everyone even when they showed him their worst, the one who'd really believed that kindness could change the world. Jimmy had been dead for 20 years, but looking at that crumpled dollar, Garrett could almost hear his voice. "See, man, I told you there was still good in the world. You just have to look for it." Garrett tucked the dollar into his wallet next to Jimmy's photograph. The 2 most valuable things he owned now, one given in love, one given in kindness, both reminders of what mattered in a life full of things that didn't. He left the diner and walked to his Harley. The fog had lifted almost completely, revealing patches of blue sky through the remaining gray. The air was still cold, but the sun had some warmth in it now. Garrett straddled the bike and started the engine. The rumble was the same as always, steady and familiar. But something inside him felt different, lighter maybe, or heavier in a better way, like the beginning of something instead of the endless continuation of nothing. He pulled out of the parking lot and headed south toward the clubhouse. The wind cut cold against his face. The road rolled out before him, same as it had every day for 23 years. But today, for the first time in longer than he could remember, Garrett Brennan was thinking about someone else. a skinny little girl with a crumpled dollar and a gap-toothed smile who'd looked at a monster and seen a man. He was going to find out more about Sadie Mitchell and her Aunt Marlene. He was going to make sure that kid had food to eat and clothes that fit and a chance at the kind of life she deserved. He didn't know how yet, didn't know what it would take or what it would cost, didn't know if his brothers would understand or if the club would support him or if any of it was even possible. But he knew he was going to try. Because Sadie Mitchell had given him her last dollar, and that meant something. That meant everything. The clubhouse appeared ahead, the heavy steel door, visible from the street. Garrett pulled into the lot and killed the engine. Sat there for a moment in the sudden silence, still feeling the weight of that folded bill in his wallet. Inside, his brothers were waiting. The men who'd been his family for half his life. The men who'd stood by him through everything. It was time to see if they'd stand by him through this too. He walked into the clubhouse, the heavy door clanging shut behind him. The familiar smells hit him immediately: leather, motor oil, cigarettes, stale beer. The air was dim despite the hour. Only a few small windows letting in the outside light. 3 of his brothers were already there. Kenny Gears Dawson sat at the bar, a carburetor disassembled before him, his oil-stained hands moving with the precision of a surgeon. He'd been the club's best mechanic for 15 years, could rebuild an engine blindfolded, could listen to a bike run for 5 seconds and tell you exactly what was wrong. Derek Shadow Ramsey lounged on one of the battered couches, scrolling through his phone. Shadow handled the club's business connections, knew people in every industry, from construction to accounting, could make things happen that no one else could. Tommy Boulder Pickett played pool alone, the click of balls the only sound besides the low murmur of the radio. Boulder was the quiet one, the thoughtful one, the one who didn't speak much but noticed everything. "Brennan," Gears looked up from his work. "You're early. Meeting's not till 2. "Got time." Garrett grabbed a beer from the fridge, twisted off the cap. Took a long pull. "Need to talk to you guys about something." That got their attention. All 3 men turned to look at him, reading the shift in his demeanor, the way brothers learn to read each other over years of shared experience. "What kind of something?" Shadow asked, setting down his phone. Garrett told him about Sadie, about the crumpled dollar, about the breakfast and the conversation and the things he'd seen in her eyes. He told him about her dead mother and her struggling aunt, about the worn clothes and the too thin frame and the smile that had somehow pierced through every wall he'd ever built. When he finished, the clubhouse was quiet. "A kid," Gears said finally. "You want us to look into a kid's situation?" "Her aunt works at the cannery, cleans offices at night too. Marlene Hartwell. Can't be that many people fitting that description." Shadow leaned forward, elbows on knees. "What exactly are you planning to do here, Garrett?" It was a fair question. The club had a reputation and most of it was earned. They weren't social workers. They weren't a charity. They were bikers who lived by their own code, took care of their own, and generally didn't get involved in civilian problems. "The kid's going hungry," Garrett said. "She's 8 years old, skinny as a rail, wearing clothes that don't fit, and she gave me her last dollar because she thought I looked cold. Her aunt's killing herself, working 2 jobs, and it's still not enough." He paused. "I want to help." "Since when do we help random civilians?" Gears asked, but there was no hostility in it. Just curiosity. "Since a little girl reminded me that there's still kindness in the world. Since she looked at me like I was a person instead of a threat. Since," Garrett stopped, gathered himself, "since I realized we've got the ability to do something and no good reason not to." Boulder set down his pool cue and spoke for the first time. "What do you need? Information first. I want to know exactly what the situation is, how bad it's gotten, whether social services are already involved, whether there's family besides the aunt." Garrett met each of their eyes in turn. "Then we figure out what we can do about it." The heavy steel door banged open and more members filed in. Travis Smoke Patterson, Dale Rutherford, and others. At the back of the group came Vernon Hawk Colton, the chapter president. Hawk was 58 years old with a weathered face that told the story of 40 years on motorcycles and 2 decades running the Oakland chapter. His gray hair was pulled back in a ponytail. His eyes missed nothing. "Meeting's not for 3 hours, Hawk said, his gaze finding Garrett. "Why's everyone looking at you like you just announced you were joining the priesthood?" "Brennan wants to adopt a kid," Gears said with a slight smirk. "What?" Garrett told the story again. Different details this time tailored to what would matter to Hawk. The club's reputation, the community they operated in, the PR value of helping a struggling family. But really, he just told the truth. A little girl gave him $1. It mattered. Hawk listened without expression. When Garrett finished, the president was quiet for a long moment. "You remember Jerry Bowman?" Hawk asked finally. The name brought a wave of memory. Jerry had been a solid member back in the 90s and early 2000s. Good rider, reliable, had a daughter. "Yeah," Garrett said. "He died in a crash 5 years back." His daughter, Lily. Her mother was a junkie, disappeared when Lily was small. Jerry did his best to raise her right, but he was always here or on runs or trying to keep his construction company afloat. Hawk's expression darkened with old regret. When he died, she had nobody. Went into the system, foster homes, the whole thing. Garrett remembered Lily now, a sweet kid who used to come to barbecues at the clubhouse, drew pictures of motorcycles, laughed at all of Jerry's terrible jokes. What happened to her? Last I heard, she was working the streets in LA, strung out on the same poison that took her mother. Hawk met Garrett's eyes directly. "We should have done more for that girl. We should have stepped up when Jerry couldn't. Instead, we let the system take her, and the system broke her." The clubhouse had gone completely silent. Everyone knew Jerry, everyone remembered Lily, and everyone felt the weight of what Hawk was saying. "I'm not gonna let that happen again," Hawk said. "Not if we can help it." He turned to address the room. "Brennan wants to look into a kid's situation. A little girl whose aunt is struggling. Anyone got a problem with that?" No one spoke. "Good." Hawk nodded at Garrett. "Find out what you can. Keep it quiet. If there's something we can do, we'll do it. But be smart about it. Last thing we need is social services thinking we're running some kind of scam." "I'll be careful." "See that you are." Hawk's expression softened slightly. "You're a good man, Brennan. Don't think I haven't noticed how you are at the Veterans Hall, how you treat people. This club needs more of that. We all do." The meeting broke up into smaller conversations. Garrett found himself standing with Gears, Shadow, and Boulder, the three men who'd been there when he first walked in. "I got a cousin at the cannery," Gears said. "I can ask around about this Marlene Hartwell. Find out what the deal is." "My sister's a teacher at Oakland Elementary," Boulder offered. "If the kid goes there, Jenny will know about her." Shadow was already on his phone. "I know people who run businesses on Telegraph. If the aunt needs better work, I might be able to find something." Garrett felt something ease in his chest. This was why he'd stayed with the club all these years. Because when it mattered, when you really needed them, your brother showed up. "Appreciate it," he said, "all of you." "Don't thank us yet," Gears said, but he was almost smiling. "Thank us when that little girl's eating 3 meals a day and wearing clothes that fit." 2 days later, Garrett had a picture of exactly how bad things were for Sadie Mitchell and her Aunt Marlene. Gears' cousin confirmed that Marlene worked at the cannery, showed up early, stayed late, never complained. But the wages were barely above minimum, and the hours were grueling. Shadow's contacts revealed that she also cleaned offices 4 nights a week for an additional $200. Cash off the books. Barely enough to keep the lights on. Boulder's sister Jenny taught at Oakland Elementary, and yes, she knew Sadie Mitchell. A sweet girl, smart, polite, but showing signs. Falling asleep in class, wearing the same clothes multiple days in a row, eating the free breakfast and lunch like she was starving. Which she probably was. Jenny's already filed concerns with the school counselor, Boulder reported. If things don't improve, social services is going to get involved. And once CPS starts poking around, he didn't need to finish the sentence. Everyone knew what happened when Child Protective Services got involved. The system was overwhelmed. Kids got removed from the only family they had left, got bounced between foster homes, got broken, like Lily. "We need to move fast," Garrett said, "before CPS decides to act." "I might have something," Shadow said. "Guy I know owns a small accounting firm, needs someone for data entry and basic bookkeeping. $15 an hour, benefits after 90 days. Day shift, regular hours. He owes me a favor." "Would he hire someone without experience?" "For me, he'll take a chance." Garrett nodded. "What about their housing situation?" "Checked into that too. Apartments in East Oakland, rough neighborhood. They're 3 months behind on rent. Landlord's been patient, but that won't last forever." How much? 2,400 for the back rent, 700 a month going forward. Garrett did the math. It was a lot of money, but not impossible. Not if the club pulled resources. I'll cover the back rent, he said. Anonymous donation. Can you arrange for someone to deliver a gift card to a grocery store? Something substantial, like $500. Put a note with it. For Sadie. You sure about this? Gears asked. That's a lot of green for someone you just met. I'm sure. Because he kept thinking about that crumpled dollar, about what it meant for a child to give away everything she had, about the kind of person who did that and the kind of world that made it necessary. There's something else, Boulder said, something Jenny mentioned. The school secretary told her that a guy's been asking questions, some lawyer parent of another kid at the school, wanted to know about Sadie's living situation, about whether Marlene was a fit guardian. Garrett felt a chill that had nothing to do with the weather. What's his name? Preston Ashworth. Rich guy lives in the hills. His daughter's in Sadie's grade. Why is he so interested in Sadie Mitchell? Jenny doesn't know, but he's been making noise about protecting the children of our community, whatever that means. Garrett filed the name away for later consideration. Right now, the priority was making sure Sadie had food to eat and a roof over her head. Everything else could wait. The following Tuesday, Garrett was at Rosie's Diner at 7:15, coffee in front of him, crumpled dollar still in his wallet. At 7:30, the door chimed and Sadie Mitchell bounded in like a small pink hurricane. Mr. Garrett. Her face lit up when she saw him. You came back. Said I might. She slid into the booth across from him, practically vibrating with energy. Guess what? The most amazing things have been happening. My aunt got a new job, a real job with a desk and a computer and everything, and someone paid our back rent, all of it, and there was a gift card in our mailbox for groceries. And now we have food in the fridge, actual food, and Aunt Marlene cried, but happy tears, not sad tears, and she had to stop to breathe. That's great news, Garrett said, keeping his expression carefully neutral. It's like magic, like someone's looking out for us. Sadie tilted her head, studying him with those two perceptive eyes. You wouldn't know anything about that. Would you, Mr. Garrett? Don't know what you mean. She didn't look convinced, but she let it go. Anyway, Aunt Marlene gave me money for breakfast, real money. She pulled a $5 bill from her pocket and smoothed it on the table proudly. I can pay for myself now. That's good, real good. Donna appeared with menus and a knowing smile. The usual for everyone? The usual, Sadie confirmed, but extra bacon for Aunt Marlene. She never eats enough bacon. They ordered. They ate. They talked about ordinary things, school, work, the weather, plans for the summer. The kind of conversation that families have over breakfast when the world isn't ending and the future feels possible. Halfway through the meal, Sadie reached into her backpack and pulled out something small. A drawing, crayon on construction paper. Two figures, one tall and dark, with what might have been a motorcycle nearby, one small and blonde. They were both smiling. Above them, in careful, childish letters, it said, Friends. I made this for you, Sadie said, suddenly shy, so you'll remember me when you're not here. Garrett took the drawing carefully, like it was made of something precious. Sadie, I don't need a picture to remember you. You're with me all the time. I know, but now I'm with you officially. She pointed at the frame. That's us. That's our friendship. Whenever you look at it, you'll remember that you have a family, that you're not alone anymore. Garrett looked at the drawing for a long moment. Then he opened his wallet and carefully removed the crumpled dollar bill and the old photo of his brother Jimmy. He tucked Sadie's drawing in beside them. There, he said, the three most important things I own, all together. Sadie beamed. What's the third thing? The dollar. Your dollar, the one you gave me that first day. I've kept it ever since. Sadie's eyes went wide. You still have it after all this time? It reminds me. Garrett's voice was rough with emotion. It reminds me that there's still kindness in the world, that someone saw me as human when everyone else saw a monster, that the smallest gesture can change everything. Outside the window, the school bus appeared at the corner. That's my bus, Sadie said, sliding out of the booth. But before she ran for the door, she paused and looked back at Garrett with those clear blue eyes. See you next Tuesday. Next Tuesday, Same time, same place. Not possible. Garrett looked at this little girl who'd given him her last dollar, who'd seen through his leather and ink to whatever lay beneath, who'd reminded him that kindness still existed in a world that had given her every reason to believe otherwise. I promise, he said, all the Tuesdays. Sadie's smile could have powered the whole city. She ran for the bus, waving from the window as it pulled away. Garrett watched until it disappeared around the corner, then sat alone with his cooling coffee and the weight of a promise he intended to keep. Outside Rosie's diner, the sun had fully burned off the fog. The sky was clear and blue. But across the street, parked in the shadow of a closed storefront, a silver Mercedes idled with its engine running. Preston Ashworth sat behind the wheel watching, taking photos with his phone, documenting the Hell's Angel who kept meeting with a vulnerable 8-year-old girl, building a case. Garrett didn't notice the car as he walked to his Harley, didn't see the man behind the wheel or the cold determination in his eyes. Didn't know that the storm was already gathering on the horizon, but that was okay. Garrett had weathered storms before, and this time he wasn't fighting just for himself. This time he was fighting for Sadie Mitchell, for the crumpled dollar in his wallet and the drawing tucked beside it, for the smile of a child who'd reminded him what it meant to be human. This time he was fighting for something that mattered. 6 weeks passed like pages turning in a book Garrett hadn't known he was writing. The Tuesday morning breakfast became ritual, sacred. The one appointment Garrett never missed, never rescheduled, never allowed anything to interfere with. Rain or shine club business or personal chaos, he was at Rosie's Diner at 7:15 every Tuesday morning, coffee steaming in front of him, waiting for the chime of the bell that announced Sadie Mitchell's arrival. She always came in like a small hurricane of energy and words, backpack bouncing, hair flying, face bright, with whatever story she'd been saving all week to tell him. The transformation in her was remarkable. Color had returned to her cheeks. The shadows under her eyes had faded. Her clothes still weren't new, but they fit better now, and there was a jacket that actually kept her warm. More than the physical changes, though, was the light in her eyes. The desperate edge that had marked their first meeting was gone, replaced by something that looked almost like hope. Garrett learned things about Sadie during these breakfasts. She loved reading, especially books about animals. Her favorite color was purple, specifically the purple of twilight just before the stars came out. She wanted to be a veterinarian when she grew up, or maybe a teacher like Mrs. Patterson, who made everyone feel smart even when they got answers wrong. She was scared of thunderstorms, but pretended not to be because she didn't want Aunt Marlene to worry. She missed her mother with an ache that sometimes stopped her mid-sentence, her eyes going distant, her voice trailing off into silence. Garrett learned to recognize these moments and wait them out without comment, letting her come back to the present in her own time. Sadie learned things about Garrett too, though he was far less forthcoming. She learned that he was good with his hands, that he could fix anything mechanical. She learned he'd been riding motorcycles since he was 16, that the Harley in the parking lot was his fourth bike and the one he loved best. She learned his favorite color was blue, like the sky on a clear day when the fog burned off and Oakland sparkled in the sunlight. She learned that beneath the leather and the ink and the fearsome reputation was someone who listened, really listened, who remembered what she'd said the week before and asked follow-up questions, who treated her opinions as worthy of consideration, not dismissed them as childish nonsense. Most grown-ups don't listen, she told him one morning halfway through her second pancake. They pretend to, but you can tell they're just waiting for you to stop talking so they can say what they were already going to say. That sounds frustrating. It is, but you're not like that. You actually hear me. She tilted her head, studying him with those perceptive blue eyes. Why? Garrett considered the question seriously, the way he'd learned to consider all of Sadie's questions. Because you have things worth hearing, he said finally. And because I spent too many years not listening to anybody, figured it was time to start. The relationship grew beyond just Tuesday breakfast. Garrett found himself riding past Sadie's school sometimes just to catch a glimpse of her on the playground. She was always in motion, running with other kids, laughing, playing. Normal, happy, the way an 8-year-old should be. He started checking in on the apartment building, making sure the neighborhood stayed as safe as a neighborhood in East Oakland could be. The local dealers knew his cut, knew what it meant. They gave the building a wide berth. When Marlene's ancient washing machine finally gave up the ghost, Garrett showed up with tools and a replacement part he'd found at a salvage yard. Marlene had protested at first, uncomfortable with accepting help, but Garrett just shrugged and said the machine needed fixing, and he knew how to fix things. He didn't mention that he'd paid for the part himself. Didn't mention the hours he'd spent tracking down the exact model she needed. Just fixed the machine and refused the money Marlene tried to press into his hands. "Consider it thanks for raising such a good kid," he said. Marlene's eyes had gone bright with tears she was too proud to shed. The club noticed the changes in Garrett. He smiled more, laughed more easily. The hard edges that had defined him for years seemed to soften, not in weakness, but in something that looked almost like peace. He still showed up for every meeting, still did his share of club work, still rode with his brothers on runs. But there was something different about him now. Hawk commented on it one evening after a chapter meeting. "That girl's been good for you," the president said. "I haven't seen you this centered in years." "She reminds me why any of this matters," Garrett admitted. "Easy to forget doing what we do. Easy to get lost in the bullshit. But then I see her smile and I remember that there's still good in the world worth protecting." "Hold on to that," Hawk said. "We could all use more reminders like that." The other brothers had started getting involved in their own ways. Gears launched a program fixing bicycles for underprivileged kids, teaching them basic mechanics in the clubhouse garage on Saturday mornings. Kids who'd never seen the inside of a Hells Angels clubhouse, learning to patch tires and adjust brakes from men their parents had taught them to fear. Boulder started volunteering at his sister Jenny's school, reading to first graders who struggled with literacy. The sight of the massive biker with his fierce tattoos sitting in a tiny chair and doing character voices for Where the Wild Things Are had become something of a legend among the faculty. Shadow organized a back-to-school drive, collecting supplies for families that couldn't afford them. Pencils and notebooks and backpacks distributed anonymously through community centers and churches. No Hells Angels branding, no credit claimed, just help given because it was needed. The Oakland chapter was still everything it had always been, but it was becoming something else too, something that felt like hope. The fifth Tuesday after their first meeting, Sadie arrived at the diner with a look on her face that Garrett had learned to recognize. Thoughtful, determined, working something out. She slid into the booth across from him and folded her hands on the table with unusual formality. "Mr. Garrett, I need to ask you something." "Go ahead." "Are you the one who's been helping us? Not just the breakfast, but all of it. The job for Aunt Marlene, the rent money, the groceries of my hours." Garrett had known this conversation was coming. Sadie was too smart, too observant to miss the connections forever. "What makes you think that little things?" She ticked them off on her fingers. "The gift card smelled like motor oil. The note was written on the same kind of paper as your napkin drawings. When you came to fix our washing machine, you already knew which apartment was ours without asking." She fixed him with a penetrating stare. "And the timing. Everything started getting better right after I met you." Garrett took a sip of his coffee, considering how to respond. "Would it matter if it was me?" "Yes." Sadie's voice was firm. "Because if it was, I need you to know something." "What's that?" "I don't like being pitied." Her chin lifted with that fierce pride he'd come to know so well. "Uncle Danny taught me that taking charity makes you weak. That you should always pay your own way, give as much as you take. I've been feeling like maybe we've been taking too much and not giving anything back." Garrett set down his coffee cup. "Sadie, look at me." She met his eyes squarely, waiting. "What you gave me that first morning is worth more than everything I've done since. You understand that it was just $1. It was everything you had. You gave it freely without expecting anything in return to someone everyone else was afraid of. Because you thought I needed something warm." Garrett leaned forward. "You know how long it had been since anyone showed me that kind of kindness. Since anyone looked at me and saw a person instead of a threat." Sadie shook her head. "I don't remember," Garrett said. "Years, maybe decades, but you did. An 8-year-old girl with nothing gave me something I didn't even know I needed." He paused. "So no, this isn't charity. This isn't pity. This is me trying to return a favor I can never really repay." Sadie was quiet for a long moment, processing this. "So we're not a project to you. We're not just some good deed you're doing to feel better about yourself." "You're my friend," Garrett said simply. "And I take care of my friends." The smile that broke across Sadie's face was like sunrise after a long night. Okay, she said. I can accept that. Friends help friends. That's different from charity. Yes, it is. But I'm still going to find ways to help you back, she warned. That's how friendship works. It goes both ways. I wouldn't expect anything less. Sadie nodded, satisfied that the matter was settled. Then her expression shifted back to its usual brightness. Now, can I tell you about the science project I'm doing? It's about the migration patterns of monarch butterflies, and it's really, really cool. Garrett smiled, something he found himself doing more often these days. Tell me everything. The seventh week brought the meeting with Marlene that Garrett had been putting off. He'd been content to work in the background, helping without intruding, but Hawk's advice echoed in his mind. If this was going to continue, if he was going to be a permanent fixture in Sadie's life, it needed to be official, transparent, the kind of thing that could withstand scrutiny. He brought Boulder with him as a witness. Saturday afternoon, neutral lighting, two bikers on motorcycles pulling up to a rundown apartment building in East Oakland. He knew what it looked like, knew what people would assume. Marlene Hartwell answered the door with wary eyes and a tension in her shoulders that spoke of too many past encounters with men who meant her harm. She was 32 but looked older, worn down by work and worry and grief. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail. Her hands were rough from labor, but her spine was straight and she met Garrett's eyes directly. Mr. Brennan, Miss Hartwell, this is Tommy Pickett. We were hoping to talk. Marlene studied them both, clearly weighing risks and options. Then she stepped back and opened the door wider. 5 minutes. The apartment was small but immaculate. Every surface clean, every item in its place. Children's drawings covered one wall, Sadie's artwork, bright splashes of color against the faded paint. A battered couch faced a small television. Library books were stacked neatly on a side table. Poverty, but not squalor. Pride in what little they had. I can't offer you anything, Marlene said, remaining standing. We don't have much. We're not here for hospitality. Garrett kept his voice even, non-threatening. We're here to explain some things and ask for your permission. Permission for what? To keep being part of Sadie's life, openly, with your knowledge and approval. Marlene's expression flickered through several emotions. Suspicion, confusion, fear. I know who you are, she said. I know what that jacket means. I've been doing my research since Sadie started talking about Mr. Garrett every day after school. What did your research tell you? That you've been with the Oakland chapter for 23 years, that you've never been arrested for violent crime, that you volunteer at the VA hospital fixing motorcycles for disabled veterans. She paused. That 3 years ago you paid for a club member's daughter's medical treatment when insurance wouldn't cover it. Garrett was surprised. He hadn't expected her to dig that deep. You're thorough. I have to be. My niece is all I have left. Marlene's voice hardened. Her mother was my baby sister. I promised her at the end that I would keep Sadie safe, that I would protect her no matter what. So yes, when a Hell's Angel starts showing interest in my 8-year-old, I do my research. That's fair. What I can't figure out is why. Marlene stepped closer, studying Garrett's face like she was trying to read his soul. Why would someone like you care about a struggling kid and her overwhelmed aunt? What's the angle? What do you want from us? Garrett reached into his wallet and pulled out the crumpled dollar bill, held it up so Marlene could see. She gave me this, the first day we met. It was everything she had, and she offered it to me because she thought I looked like I needed something warm. He folded the bill carefully and tucked it back in his wallet. Nobody's shown me that kind of kindness in longer than I can remember. I wanted to return the favor. By paying our rent, finding me a new job, filling our refrigerator. By making sure your niece has what she needs to grow up healthy and happy. The rest of it, he shrugged. It needed doing. Marlene was quiet for a long moment. She talks about you constantly, she finally said. Tuesday mornings are the highlight of her week. She counts down the days. A pause. I've never seen her light up for anyone the way she lights up for you. Not since her mother died. She's an extraordinary kid. She is, too extraordinary for the life I can give her. Marlene's voice cracked slightly. I work 60 hours a week and it's still not enough. I'm exhausted all the time. I try to be there for her, try to give her what she needs, but I'm failing. I know I'm failing. You're not failing, you're surviving. There's a difference, but is there? Marlene laughed bitterly. Some nights I come home so tired I can barely see straight. Sadie's already done her homework, already made herself a dinner, already put herself to bed. 8 years old and she's basically raising herself because I don't have the energy to do it. That's not failure, that's circumstances. And circumstances can change. Can they? Marlene looked at him with desperate hope and ingrained skepticism warring in her eyes. Because from where I'm standing, it feels like I'm drowning, and every time I think I've got my head above water, another wave comes and pulls me back under. Garrett glanced at Boulder, who gave a small nod. That's why we're here, Garrett said. Not to take Sadie away or undermine your authority, but to offer support, a safety net, someone you can call when things get hard. Why would you do that? Because Sadie needs it, because you need it, because we can. Garrett held Marlene's gaze steadily. The club has resources, connections, ways to make problems disappear and opportunities appear. We've been using some of that to help you already. We'd like to keep doing it, but in the open this time, with your knowledge and consent. Marlene looked at Boulder. And you're part of this too. Yes, ma'am. Boulder's voice was low and steady. My sister Jenny teaches at Sadie's school. She speaks highly of your niece, says she's one of the kindest kids she's ever met. Jenny Pickett, the one who reads to the struggling readers. That's her. Marlene absorbed this information, adding it to whatever calculations she was running in her head. What exactly are you proposing? She asked finally. Garrett laid it out simply. Tuesday breakfast would continue publicly in the diner, where everyone could see there was nothing inappropriate happening. He would be available for household emergencies. The club would maintain its quiet support of their situation. And if anything ever went wrong, if Marlene ever needed help she couldn't get elsewhere, she would have a number to call. No strings, Garrett said. No expectations, just help when you need it and friendship when you want it. And if I say no, if I tell you to stay away from my niece, then we disappear. You never see us again. Garrett's voice was calm, but the words cost him something. I won't force my presence on a family that doesn't want me, but I hope you'll give this a chance. Marlene walked to the window and looked out at the parking lot where their motorcycles waited, chrome gleaming in the afternoon sun, symbols of everything respectable society feared. Danny rode motorcycles, she said quietly, before he got sick, before Sarah died. He was a good man, rough around the edges, covered in tattoos, served 2 tours overseas. But he loved Sarah more than anything, would have done anything for her and Sadie. What happened to him? The war happened. Chemical exposure, the doctor said. Something they used over there that they're still not admitting to. He came home different, but he fought so hard to be the man Sarah needed. Marlene's voice was distant with old grief. He died 8 months before Sarah did. I think losing him is what made her give up, like she'd just been waiting for permission to let go. I'm sorry. Me too. Marlene turned back to face them. Danny used to tell her that bikers looked scary but had good hearts, that the leather and the ink were armor, not identity, that you had to look past the surface to see who someone really was. Sounds like a wise man. He was. Marlene took a deep breath. Sadie doesn't remember him well. She was too young, but sometimes I think she inherited his ability to see past appearances. The way she approached you that first day, giving you her last dollar, that's exactly the kind of thing Danny would have done. Garrett felt the weight of that comparison settle over him. This family had already lost so much, had already trusted and been broken by that trust. I want to trust you, Marlene said. I want to believe that this is what it looks like. A good man helping a kid who needs it. But I've been burned before. I've trusted the wrong people. Let them into my life, into Sarah's life, and watch them do damage that couldn't be undone. I understand. No, I don't think you do. Marlene stepped closer, her voice dropping to something fierce and protective. Sadie is everything to me. Everything. If you hurt her, if you're using her for something, if this is some kind of game, it's not. Let me finish. Her eyes were blazing now. If you hurt my niece, there is nothing on this earth that will protect you from me. I don't care how many brothers you have or how scary your reputation is. I will destroy you. Do you understand? Garrett met her fire with calm certainty. I understand, and I'd expect nothing less. Something in Marlene's expression shifted. The fierceness remained, but it was joined by something that looked almost like respect. Okay, she said finally. Okay, we'll try this, but I want to meet you properly. Not as a biker and a scared aunt. As two adults who both care about Sadie's welfare. I want to have dinner with you, talk to you, understand who you are. Name the time and place. Sunday, here. Nothing fancy, but it'll give us a chance to talk without. She gestured vaguely at the motorcycles, the leather, the weight of first impressions. Sunday works, Marlene nodded slowly. Then I'll see you Sunday, Mr. Brennan. Garrett, please. Garrett, then. She almost smiled. Sadie said you were different, that you actually listened. I think maybe she was right. The weeks that followed settled into a pattern that felt almost like normalcy. Sunday dinner at the apartment became a regular occurrence. Garrett learned that Marlene made excellent meatloaf and terrible coffee. He learned that Sadie dominated at Scrabble, despite her age using words no 8-year-old should know. He learned that the small apartment could feel like a home when it was filled with laughter. Sadie started calling him at random times, when she got a good grade on a test, when she saw a mom that looked like a wolf, when she couldn't sleep and needed someone to tell her a story. Garrett found himself telling her about his own childhood, the parts that weren't too dark, about learning to ride a bike on streets not unlike hers, about his mother's chocolate chip cookies and his brother Jimmy's terrible jokes. He told her about Jimmy, not everything, not the drinking or the fights or the way their father's fists had shaped them both, but about how Jimmy had always believed in the good in people, how he'd given away his lunch to kids who were hungrier, how he died still believing that kindness mattered. He sounds like he would have liked me, Sadie said one night, her voice sleepy through the phone. He would have loved you, Garrett said and meant it. The club continued its transformation. The Saturday mechanic sessions for kids had become so popular that Gears had to set up a waiting list. Boulder's story time at the elementary school had expanded to twice a week. Shadow's charitable initiatives had grown to include winter coat drives and holiday food baskets. The Oakland chapter was still everything it had always been, but it was becoming something else too, something that felt like hope. At the 11th week, Garrett noticed something wrong. He was at Rosie's diner for their usual Tuesday breakfast when Sadie came in looking troubled. Not the usual burst of energy, not the usual bright smile. She slid into the booth with her eyes downcast. What's wrong? Sadie pushed her pancakes around her plate without eating. A man came to school yesterday. A parent. He was asking questions about me. Garrett felt ice form in his chest. What kind of questions? About who picks me up, about my family, about, she hesitated, about you. What did he look like? Fancy clothes, gray hair, drove a silver car. Sadie finally looked up, and there was fear in her eyes, fear that hadn't been there since their first meeting. He told some of the other parents that you were dangerous, that you were trying to hurt me. Mrs. Patterson made him leave, but I saw the way people looked at me after. Preston Ashworth. The name surfaced in Garrett's mind like a warning. Sadie listened to me. Whatever that man said, it's not true. You know that, right? I know. But her voice wavered. It's just, why would he say those things? Why would he try to make people scared of you? You've never done anything wrong. Garrett wanted to explain, wanted to tell her about the prejudices that followed men like him, about the fear that made people see monsters where there were only men. But she was 8 years old. She shouldn't have to understand these things. Some people judge others without knowing them, he said carefully. They see my jacket, my bike, my tattoos, and they decide I must be bad. They don't take the time to look deeper. That's stupid. It is, but it happens. Sadie's jaw set with determination. If he comes back, I'm going to tell him he's wrong. I'm going to tell everyone he's wrong. You're my friend and you're good, and I don't care what anyone says. Sadie, no. She cut him off fierce in a way he'd never seen before. You told me that Uncle Danny was right, that you can't judge people by how they look. You told me I was brave for giving you that $1. Well, now it's my turn to be brave for you. The words hit Garrett like a physical force. This child, this tiny girl ready to fight the world for him. You don't have to protect me, he said softly. Yes, I do. That's what friends do. She reached across the table and put her small hand over his scarred knuckles. You protected me when I was hungry and scared. Now I protect you when people are being mean. That's fair. Garrett didn't trust himself to speak. He just nodded, and Sadie seemed to accept that as enough. But even as they finished their breakfast, even as he watched her run for the school bus with her usual wave, Garrett knew that something had changed. Preston Ashworth was making moves, asking questions, building a narrative. It was time to find out exactly what he was planning. Shadow came through with information within 48 hours. Preston Ashworth was 45 years old, a partner at one of Oakland's most prestigious law firms. Wealthy, influential, deeply involved in community affairs. His daughter attended the same school as Sadie. 5 years ago, his teenage son Tyler had been attacked by a group of bikers outside a bar in San Francisco. Not Hell's Angels, a smaller club since disbanded. But the assault had left Tyler with a broken jaw and a fear of motorcycles that persisted to this day. Preston had become obsessed with what he called criminal motorcycle elements, had lobbied the city council for stricter enforcement, had donated money to anti-gang initiatives, had made it his personal mission to protect children from what he saw as a clear and present danger. He's not going to stop, Shadow said. I talked to some people who know him. He's convinced you're grooming that little girl for something. He's been in contact with Child Protective Services, pushing them to open an investigation. Garrett felt cold settle in his bones. On what grounds? Suspicious relationship between a known criminal organization member and a vulnerable child. He's got photos of you at the diner, at the school, at the apartment building. He's been documenting everything. Everything I've done has been in public, in plain sight. There's nothing inappropriate about any of it. We know that, but Ashworth doesn't care about truth. He cares about narrative. And the narrative he's building is that a Hell's Angel has targeted a poor orphan girl for purposes unknown. Shadow's expression was grim. He's already got a neighbor on board, old woman named Palmer. She's been watching the apartment, keeping notes on when you visit, adding her own assumptions to his file. Garrett thought about Marlene, about the progress she'd made, the hope she'd started to feel. Thought about Sadie, bright and brave and fierce in her defense of him. If CPS opened an investigation, if they decided Marlene's association with him made her an unfit guardian. There's more, Shadow said. Ashworth has been making calls, rallying other parents. He's planning to make a formal complaint at the next school board meeting, going to demand that you be banned from school property and that Sadie be evaluated for signs of abuse. There are no signs of abuse because there is no abuse. Doesn't matter. Once the accusation is out there, it takes on a life of its own. Even if CPS clears you, even if the school finds nothing, Sadie will be marked. The girl who was maybe possibly abused by a biker. It'll follow her. Garrett slammed his fist against the table, making Shadow jump. This is insane. I bought a hungry kid some pancakes. I helped her aunt keep a roof over their heads. That's it. That's all I've done. I know, we all know, but Ashworth, he's not thinking rationally. He sees bikers, he sees his son's blood on that parking lot. He can't separate us from them, and he won't stop until he's destroyed what he sees as the threat. Garrett forced himself to breathe, to think. Panic wouldn't help Sadie. What are our options? Rebecca Torres, the club lawyer, she's good. She's dealt with this kind of thing before. We can get ahead of it, document everything, build a counter-narrative. Do it. Whatever it takes, whatever it costs. There's something else. Shadow hesitated. You might want to consider backing off. Just temporarily. Give Ashworth nothing to photograph. Let things cool down. No. Garrett. I said no. Garrett's voice was iron. I promised Sadie I'd be there for her. I told her I wouldn't disappear. If I pull back now, what does that teach her? That people leave when things get hard? That promises don't mean anything? It teaches her that sometimes discretion is the better part of valor. It teaches her that she can't count on anyone, and I won't do that to her. Garrett stood his jaw tight. Set up the meeting with Rebecca. We're going to fight this the right way, in the open, with the truth. Shadow nodded slowly. I hope you know what you're doing. I'm protecting my friend. Garrett headed for the door, same as I'd do for any of you. The call from Marlene came 2 days later. Her voice was shaking when Garrett answered. He could hear Sadie crying in the background. They called, Marlene said. Child Protective Services. Someone filed multiple reports about Sadie being in contact with a known criminal. They're opening an investigation. Garrett closed his eyes. When the caseworker is coming Thursday, they're going to inspect the apartment, interview me, interview Sadie. Her voice cracked. Garrett, what if they take her? What if they decide I'm unfit because I let you into our lives? They won't. You don't know that. You can't promise that. Marlene, listen to me. You're a good guardian. That apartment is clean. Sadie is healthy and happy. You have a stable job. You're providing for her. You love her. There's nothing for them to find. Except my niece's best friend is a Hell's Angel. I'm not a criminal. I've never been convicted of a violent crime. I volunteer in the community. I have character references from veterans, business owners, teachers. If they investigate me, they'll find a middle-aged mechanic who rides with the club and takes care of a kid who needed someone. You really think that'll be enough? It has to be. There was a long pause. In the background, Sadie's crying had subsided to sniffles. She wants to talk to you, Marlene said. She's scared, but she's also angry. Really angry. I've never seen her like this. The phone shuffled, and then Sadie's voice came through, thick with tears, but fierce beneath them. Mr. Garrett, I'm here, sweetheart. They're trying to take me away from Aunt Marlene because of you, because we're friends. The words cut like knives. I know. And I'm sorry. Don't be sorry, Sadie's voice hardened. Be angry. Be ready to fight, because I'm not going to let them win. I'm not going to lie about you. I'm not going to pretend we're not friends, and I'm not going to let some mean man in a fancy suit decide who my family is. Sadie, Mom taught me that truth matters, that you have to stand up for what's right even when it's hard. She told me that over and over, even when she was sick, even at the end. Sadie's breath hitched. If I say you're bad just to make things easier, then I'm lying, and Mom would be so disappointed in me. Garrett felt his own eyes burning. Your mother would be proud of you no matter what. She'd be proud of me for being brave, for standing up for my friend. Sadie's voice steadied. I'm scared, Mr. Garrett. I'm really scared, but I'm not going to let them make me lie. You're good. You've always been good, and I'm going to make them see that even if it's hard. An 8-year-old girl ready to fight the system for him, ready to risk everything she had for the truth. You're the bravest person I know, Garrett said softly. I learned it from you. Sadie sniffled, and from Uncle Danny, and from Mom, all the brave people who looked at hard things and didn't run away. We're going to get through this. Promise. I promise. There was a pause. Then Sadie's voice came back, smaller now. Will you come to Sunday dinner still? Even with everything happening, nothing could keep me away. Okay, she sounded relieved. Okay, I'll see you Sunday then. And Mr. Garrett. Yeah, I'm glad you're my friend, even if it makes everything complicated. I'm glad you came into Rosie's diner that day. I'm glad I gave you my dollar. Garrett looked at the crumpled bill in his wallet, visible through the worn leather. Me too, Sadie, more than you know. After they hung up, Garrett sat alone in the clubhouse staring at the wall. The weight of what was coming pressed down on him like a physical force. CPS investigation, character assassination. A powerful man with resources and motivation arrayed against a little girl and her struggling aunt. Because of him. Because he'd bought a hungry kid some pancakes and dared to care about what happened to her. The door opened and Hawk walked in, reading Garrett's expression instantly. I heard, the president said. Shadow told me. What do we do? Hawk sat down across from him. We fight, same as always. We protect our own. She's not club, neither of them. They're yours, that makes them ours. Hawk's voice was firm. I told you when this started that the club would back you. I meant it. Whatever you need, whatever it takes. We're in this together. Even if it brings heat. We've faced heat before. Hawk shrugged. At least this time, we're fighting for something worth fighting for. Garrett thought about Sadie's voice on the phone, scared but fierce, ready to stand in front of the world and defend him. He couldn't let her down. Call Rebecca Torres, he said. Get everyone together. We've got 30 days to prepare for war. Hawk nodded and stood. 30 days, he repeated. Let's make them count. The 30 days that followed were the longest of Garrett Brennan's life. Each morning he woke with the weight of uncertainty pressing down on his chest like a stone. Each night he lay awake in the darkness, running through scenarios, preparing arguments, imagining the worst. The crumpled dollar bill stayed in his wallet, a talisman against despair, a reminder of why any of this mattered. Rebecca Torres proved to be worth every penny of her reputation. The club's attorney was a sharp-eyed woman in her 50s who had spent 2 decades defending people the system had decided to destroy. She listened to Garrett's story without judgment, asked pointed questions, and then got to work building a case file that would make CPS think twice about whatever conclusions they were planning to draw. Documentation is everything, she told Garrett at their first meeting. Every breakfast at that diner, every phone call, every interaction. We're going to show them a paper trail of nothing but appropriate, supportive friendship between an adult and a child who needed one. And if that's not enough, then we fight harder. Rebecca's eyes were steel. I've seen cases like this before. Someone with power and resources decides they know better than the people actually living the situation. They build a narrative based on fear and assumption instead of fact. But narratives can be challenged. Facts are stubborn things. The documentation began immediately. Donna Mercer at Rosie's Diner provided a written statement describing every Tuesday breakfast ye had witnessed over the past 3 months. Public setting, appropriate conversation, nothing that raised any concern whatsoever. Other regular customers at the diner offered similar accounts. The dangerous biker and the little girl eating pancakes and talking about school. Jenny Pickett Boulder's sister wrote a detailed letter about Sadie's transformation since Garrett had entered her life. Improved grades, better attendance, increased engagement with peers. A child who had been withdrawing from the world was now flourishing, and the timing coincided exactly with the beginning of her friendship with Mr. Brennan. Veterans from the VA hospital where Garrett volunteered twice a month came forward with character references. Men who had lost limbs, lost mobility, lost hope, describing how Garrett had helped them rebuild their lives one motorcycle at a time, how he listened without judgment, how he showed up even when no one else did. Business owners on Telegraph Avenue added their voices. The mechanic who had known Garrett for 15 years and never seen him raised his hand in anger. The bartender who had watched him break up fights instead of starting them. The grocery store owner whose shop Garrett had protected from a robbery attempt 3 years ago, staying with the shaken man until the police arrived. The picture that emerged was not of a predator targeting a vulnerable child. It was of a man who had spent decades being judged by his appearance, finally finding someone who saw past the leather and ink to the person beneath. But Preston Ashworth was building his own case. Shadow's network kept Garrett informed of the lawyer's movements. Ashworth had been busy, meeting with other parents, gathering signatures on a petition, preparing a presentation for the school board that painted Hell's Angels as a criminal organization with documented ties to violence and illegal activity. He wasn't wrong about the club's history. That was the problem. There were records, arrests, convictions, not Garrett specifically, but the organizations. And Ashworth was skilled at making the collective seem personal, the historical seem present, the complicated seem simple. He's going to stand up at that school board meeting and tell everyone that a known gang member has been grooming a vulnerable orphan, Shadow reported grimly. He's got photos, timestamps, a whole narrative about how you targeted Sadie because she was weak and alone. None of that is true. Truth doesn't matter to someone like him. Story matters, and his story is easier to understand than ours. Shadow paused. Scary biker bad, little girl in danger, heroic lawyer saves the day. It writes itself. Garrett thought about Sadie, about the fear in her voice on the phone, about the fierce determination that had replaced it. She was ready to fight for him. The least he could do was fight smart. When's the school board meeting? 3 days before the CPS decision is due. Ashworth timed it deliberately. He wants to create pressure, make the caseworker feel like the community is watching, demanding action. Then we need to be at that meeting, with our own story, our own witnesses. That's risky. You show up and you're playing into his narrative. Then I won't wear my cut. Garrett's jaw tightened. I'll wear whatever I have to wear. I'll say whatever I have to say, but I'm not letting him control the story without a fight. The Tuesday breakfast continued through the investigation, though they felt different now. Sadie arrived each week with updates on the Whisper campaign at school, which parents had started avoiding her, which kids had been told not to play with her anymore, which teachers looked at her with pity instead of warmth. Emily's mom said I couldn't come to her birthday party. Sadie reported one morning, her voice carefully neutral in the way children learn when they're trying not to show how much something hurts. She didn't say why, but I know. It's because of Mr. Ashworth, because of what he's been telling everyone. I'm sorry, sweetheart. Don't be. Emily's parties are boring anyway. But her eyes were bright with unshed tears. It just sucks. I didn't do anything wrong. You didn't do anything wrong, but everyone's acting like we're criminals. Sometimes people believe what's easy instead of what's true. That's stupid. Yeah, it is. Sadie stabbed at her pancakes with unusual aggression. Mrs. Patterson says I should just ignore it, that people will forget eventually and things will go back to normal. But I don't want to ignore it. I want to fight it. I want to stand up in front of everyone and tell them they're wrong. You might get that chance. Sadie looked up surprised. The school board meeting, Garrett explained. Mr. Ashworth is going to make his case there. Try to get me banned from school property. Try to make the board pressure CPS into taking an action. Can I come? Can I speak? That's up to your aunt. But if she says yes, and if you want to, then yes, you can tell your story. Something shifted in Sadie's expression. The hurt was still there, but it was joined by something else now. Purpose, determination. The same fierce spirit that had led her to offer a stranger her last dollar on a cold Tuesday morning. I want to, she said. I want everyone to know the truth. Not just about you, but about what kindness really looks like. About how you don't have to be rich or powerful or important to make a difference. You just have to care. Garrett reached across the table and squeezed her small hand. You're going to be amazing. I know. She almost smiled. I learned from the best. The night before the school board meeting, Garrett sat alone in his apartment, staring at the clothes laid out on his bed. No leather, no denim, no boots with steel toes. Rebecca had been clear about the image he needed to project. Respectable, non-threatening, the kind of man who could be trusted around children. He'd found a pair of khakis in the back of his closet, remnants of a funeral years ago. A button-down shirt that still fit if he didn't breathe too deeply. Dress shoes that pinched his feet but looked appropriate. It felt like a costume, like pretending to be someone he wasn't. But for Sadie, he would pretend. For Sadie, he would be whatever he needed to be. His phone buzzed, a text from Marlene. She's nervous, but ready, stayed up half the night practicing what she wants to say. I've never seen her this determined about anything. Garrett typed back, she's the bravest person I know. She says the same thing about you. He set the phone down and looked at the crumpled dollar bill now framed on his nightstand, along with Sadie's drawing. Two figures smiling, friends written above them in careful childish letters. Tomorrow would determine whether that friendship survived. Tomorrow would determine everything. The Oakland Unified School District Board meeting was held in a beige conference room that smelled like industrial cleaner and old coffee. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting everything in a harsh, unflattering glow. Rows of folding chairs faced a long table where 7 board members sat with varying expressions of boredom and concern. The room was packed. Preston Ashworth had done his work well. Parents filled most of the seats, many of them clutching printed materials that Garrett recognized as Ashworth's propaganda. Photos of him at the diner, at the school, near the apartment building. All innocent moments reframed as sinister through careful captioning and suggestive language. Garrett sat in the back row with Boulder and Shadow, flanking him, both dressed in similar civilian clothes. Rebecca Torres was near the front, ready to speak when their turn came. Marlene sat in the middle section with Sadie beside her, the little girl's blonde hair neatly brushed, her best dress pressed and clean. Sadie turned and found Garrett's eyes across the crowded room. She didn't smile, but she gave him a small nod. Ready, determined, unafraid. The meeting began with routine business. Budget discussions, facility updates, a debate about school lunch programs that seemed to go on forever. Garrett's leg bounced with nervous energy. Boulder put a steadying hand on his knee. Patience, the big man murmured. Let it play out. Finally, the board chair cleared her throat and consulted her agenda. We have a community concern item that has generated significant interest. Mr. Preston Ashworth has requested time to address the board regarding student safety. Ashworth rose from his seat in the front row. He was exactly what Shadow had described. Expensive suit, silver hair perfectly styled, the confident bearing of a man who was used to being listened to and obeyed. He approached the podium with a folder thick with documentation. Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board. I come before you tonight as a concerned parent and a concerned citizen. What I'm about to share with you is deeply troubling, and I believe it requires immediate action to protect the children of our community. He opened his folder and began his presentation. Photos appeared on the room's screen. Garrett at Rosie's Diner with Sadie. Garrett's motorcycle in the school parking lot. Garrett walking near the apartment building in East Oakland. This man, Ashworth said, his voice dripping with practiced concern, is Garrett Brennan, a member of the Hells Angels Motorcycle Club for over 2 decades, an organization that the Department of Justice classifies as an outlaw motorcycle gang with documented involvement in drug trafficking, weapons dealing, and violent crime. Murmurs rippled through the audience. For the past 3 months, Mr. Brennan has been cultivating a relationship with an 8-year-old student at this school, a vulnerable child, an orphan living with a struggling aunt in one of Oakland's most dangerous neighborhoods. More photos, more suggestive captions. Ashworth painted a picture of predatory grooming of a criminal organization targeting the weakest members of the community. I have submitted a formal complaint to Child Protective Services, as have several other concerned parents. An investigation is currently underway, but I believe we cannot wait for bureaucratic processes to protect our children. I am requesting that the board take immediate action to ban Mr. Brennan from all school property and to require a safety evaluation of any student who has had contact with him. He paused, letting his words sink in. I know this is difficult to hear. I know we want to believe the best about people, but we have a responsibility to protect the children in our care. And right now, that means protecting them from Garrett Brennan. Ashworth returned to his seat to scattered applause from his supporters. The board members exchanged uncertain glances. Thank you, Mr. Ashworth, the chair said. Is there anyone who wishes to speak in response? Rebecca Torres stood. Yes, Madam Chair. I'm Rebecca Torres, attorney representing Mr. Brennan. I would like the opportunity to present an alternative perspective on the situation Mr. Ashworth has described. The chair nodded. You have 5 minutes. Rebecca approached the podium with her own folder, but she didn't open it immediately. Instead, she looked out at the audience, making eye contact with as many people as possible. What you just heard was a story, a compelling story told by a skilled storyteller. But stories aren't always true. And the story Mr. Ashworth told you tonight leaves out some crucial facts. She opened her folder. Fact: Garrett Brennan has no criminal record for violent crime. In 23 years of membership in the Hells Angels, he has never been arrested for assault, battery, or any offense involving a minor. A document appeared on the screen. Garrett's clean record. Fact: Mr. Brennan volunteers twice monthly at the Oakland VA Hospital, repairing motorcycles for disabled veterans. He has done this for over a decade, donating his time and skills to men and women who served our country. Photos of Garrett at the VA, letters of thanks from grateful veterans. Fact: the relationship between Mr. Brennan and Sadie Mitchell began when she approached him in a public diner and offered him her last dollar because she thought he looked like he needed something warm. Rebecca paused, letting that image settle. An 8-year-old girl saw past the leather and the tattoos to the human being beneath. She showed kindness to a stranger when everyone else showed fear. And Mr. Brennan, moved by that kindness, decided to help a child who was clearly struggling. More documents, statements from Donna Mercer, from Jenny Pickett, from the veterans, from business owners. A flood of testimony from people who actually knew Garrett Brennan. The truth is not what Mr. Ashworth has presented. The truth is that a lonely, hungry child found an unlikely friend, and that friend has done nothing but to support her and her family through legitimate, transparent means. Every interaction has been in public. Every action has been above board. There is no grooming. There is no predations. There is only kindness, freely given and gratefully received. Rebecca closed her folder. I would ask the board to consider the source of this complaint. Mr. Ashworth's son was attacked by bikers 5 years ago. Not Hells Angels, a different group entirely. But Mr. Ashworth has made it his mission to punish anyone who rides a motorcycle regardless of their individual character or actions. She looked directly at Ashworth, who had gone rigid in his seat. This is not about protecting children. This is about one man's trauma being projected onto an innocent situation. And if this board allows that projection to destroy a friendship that has brought nothing but good into a little girl's life, then you will be failing the very children you claim to protect. Rebecca returned to her seat. The room was silent. The board chair cleared her throat. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak? A small hand rose in the middle section. Sadie Mitchell stood up. Garrett's heart stopped. I want to speak, Sadie said, her voice clear and steady despite the trembling in her hands. I want to tell you what really happened. The chair looked uncertain. This is highly irregular. You're a minor. I'm the one everyone's talking about. Sadie's chin lifted. Don't I get to tell my own story? The board members exchanged glances. Finally, the chair nodded. You may approach the podium. Sadie walked down the aisle, small and blonde and fierce. Marlene half rose from her seat, then sat back down, trusting her niece to do what she needed to do. Sadie had to stand on tiptoes to reach the microphone. She adjusted it downward with careful hands. My name is Sadie Mitchell. I'm 8 years old. My mom died from cancer 11 months ago, and I live with my Aunt Marlene now. She works really hard, but sometimes there wasn't enough money for food. I used to go to school hungry. I used to wear the same clothes every day because we couldn't afford more. Her voice was steady, rehearsed but not false. The day I met Mr. Garrett, I hadn't eaten since lunch the day before. I was sitting in the diner waiting for my bus, and he came in. Everyone was scared of him. They looked at his jacket and his tattoos, and they decided he was bad. But I looked at his eyes, and I saw something different. I saw someone who was out and lonely and tired. Someone who needed kindness just as much as I did. She paused, gathering herself. My Uncle Danny taught me not to judge people by how they look. He had tattoos too. He served in the army. He was the kindest person I ever knew. So when I saw Mr. Garrett, I didn't see a scary biker. I saw a person who maybe needed a friend. The room was absolutely silent now. Every eye fixed on the small girl at the podium. I gave him my last dollar. It was all I had. I gave it to him because I thought he looked like he needed something warm. And you know what he did? He didn't take it. Instead, he bought me breakfast. The first real meal I'd had in 2 days. Sadie's voice cracked slightly, but she pressed on. After that, things started getting better. My aunt got a new G. We got caught up on our rent. There was food in the refrigerator. And every Tuesday, I got to have breakfast with my friend. My friend who listened to me, who treated me like I mattered, who showed up even when it would have been easier not to. She turned slightly, finding Preston Ashworth in the audience. Mr. Ashworth says Mr. Garrett is dangerous. He says he's trying to hurt me. But Mr. Ashworth has never talked to Mr. Garrett. He's never asked me what I think. He just decided he knew the truth without bothering to find out. Her voice hardened. My mom taught me that truth matters, that you have to stand up for what's right even when it's hard. She told me that over and over, even when she was sick, even at the end. If I say Mr. Garrett is bad just to make things easier, then I'm lying. And I won't do that. Not for Mr. Ashworth. Not for anyone. She looked directly at the board members. Mr. Garrett is my friend. He's a good person. He's done nothing but help me and my family when no one else would. And if you ban him from the school, if you take him away from me because of how he looks instead of who he is, then you're doing exactly what you taught us not to do. You're judging a book by its cover. Sadie stepped back from the microphone. That's all I wanted to say. Thank you for listening. She walked back to her seat with her head held high. Marlene wrapped an arm around her, pulling her close. Across the room, Garrett felt tears streaming down his face that he didn't bother to wipe away. The silence stretched for a long moment. Then Jenny Pickett stood up. I'm Sadie's teacher. Everything she said is true. She's flourished since Mr. Brennan came into her life. Her grades have improved. Her engagement has increased. She's gone from a withdrawn, struggling child to one of the brightest lights in my classroom. Another woman stood. My son plays with Sadie at recess. She's never once mentioned anything inappropriate about her friendship with Mr. Brennan. All she talks about is pancakes and motorcycles and how he listens when she tells him about her day. A man in the back rose. I'm a veteran. I lost my leg in Afghanistan. Garrett Brennan spent 3 weekends helping me rebuild a motorcycle I could ride with my prosthetic. He never asked for anything in return, just showed up and did the work because it needed doing. One by one, people stood. Donna Mercer, business owners, parents who had initially signed Ashworth's petition but had changed their minds. Voices rising in defense of a man they had feared until they actually knew him. Preston Ashworth sat rigid in his seat, watching his carefully constructed narrative collapse around him. The board chair finally called for order. I think we've heard enough testimony. The board will take this matter under advisement and issue a decision within the week. However, I want to say for the record that I have been deeply moved by what I've heard tonight, particularly from Miss Mitchell. She looked at Sadie with something like admiration. Young lady, you showed more courage in 5 minutes than most adults manage in a lifetime. Whatever happens next, you should be proud of yourself. Sadie nodded solemnly. I am, she said. My mom would be too. The meeting adjourned. People filed out slowly, many of them stopping to shake Garrett's hand or offer words of support. Preston Ashworth pushed through the crowd and disappeared without speaking to anyone. Sadie broke away from Marlene and ran to Garrett, throwing her arms around his waist. Did I do okay? Garrett knelt down to her level, not caring who saw the tears still wet on his cheeks. You did better than okay. You were perfect. I was really scared. I know. That's what makes it brave. Sadie smiled that gap-toothed grin that had started everything. I told you I'd protect you. You did. You absolutely did. The CPS decision came 5 days later. Ms. Brenda Holloway arrived at Marlene's apartment on a gray Thursday morning. She was a heavy-set woman in her 50s with kind eyes and a no-nonsense manner. She had interviewed Marlene twice, already had inspected the apartment, had reviewed all the documentation Rebecca Torres had provided. Now she was here to interview Sadie. Alone, Garrett waited at the clubhouse surrounded by his brothers, unable to eat or drink or think about anything except what was happening in that small apartment in East Oakland. The interview lasted an hour. When it was over, Marlene called with a shaking voice. She wants to talk to you. Can you come? Garrett broke every speed limit between the clubhouse and East Oakland. Ms. Holloway was waiting in the small living room when he arrived, Sadie and Marlene sitting on the couch across from her. The caseworker studied Garrett as he entered, taking in the civilian clothes he'd worn to the school board meeting, the way he immediately moved to stand protectively near Sadie and Marlene. Mr. Brennan, please sit down. Garrett sat. I've completed my investigation, Ms. Holloway said. I've reviewed all the reports, interviewed all relevant parties, and examined the living situation thoroughly. She paused, and Garrett felt his heart stop. I'm closing the case. The words didn't register at first. Closing, bum. There is no evidence of neglect, abuse, or endangerment. Sadie is thriving under her aunt's care. The apartment is clean and appropriate. All of her needs are being met. Ms. Holloway's expression softened slightly. As for your involvement, Mr. Brennan, I have to say that in 20 years of doing this job, I have rarely seen such overwhelming evidence of positive influence. She opened a folder and read from her notes. Your presence in Sadie's life has coincided with marked improvement in her academic performance, social engagement, and emotional well-being. Every person I interviewed, without exception, described your relationship with her as appropriate, supportive, and beneficial. Garrett felt Sadie's small hand slip into his. In my professional opinion, Ms. Holloway continued, removing you from Sadie's life would be detrimental to her emotional well-being. I am noting in my report that the concerns raised about your involvement appear to have been motivated by prejudice rather than evidence, and that any future complaints from the same source should be treated with appropriate skepticism. She closed the folder. I'm also noting that Sadie Mitchell demonstrated remarkable maturity, integrity, and strength of character during her interview. She spoke about truth-telling and standing up for what's right in a way that genuinely moved me. Ms. Holloway looked at Sadie with something like respect. You're an extraordinary young woman. Don't ever let anyone convince you otherwise. Sadie nodded solemnly. I won't. Ms. Holloway stood to leave. One more thing, Mr. Brennan. I received a call this morning from the school board. They've decided not to pursue any restrictions on your presence at school events. Several board members specifically mentioned Miss Mitchell's testimony as the deciding factor. She paused at the door. I should also mention that Mr. Ashworth has been formally cautioned about filing unfounded reports. Multiple complaints without merit can have serious consequences for the complainant. I suspect his influence in this community will be somewhat diminished going forward. She extended her hand. You have good people in your corner. Take care of them. Garrett shook her hand. I will. After Miss Holloway left, the apartment was quiet for a long moment. Then Sadie let out a whoop that could probably be heard 3 floors down. We won. We actually won. She threw her arms around Garrett, then around Marlene, then around Garrett again. Marlene was crying, laughing, trying to say something, but unable to get words past the emotion clogging her throat. Garrett held them both, these two people who had become his family, and felt something he hadn't felt in longer than he could remember. Peace, real peace, the peace of belonging somewhere, of mattering to someone, of having something worth protecting and knowing he had protected it. All the Tuesdays, Sadie said, her voice muffled against his chest. We still get all the Tuesdays right. All the Tuesdays, Garrett confirmed, for as long as you want them. Forever then. Forever sounds good to me. The first Tuesday after the investigation closed, Garrett arrived at Rosie's Diner at 7:15 as always. But today was different. Today Sadie wasn't alone. She burst through the door at 7:30 with Marlene behind her, both of them grinning like they'd won the lottery. They slid into the booth across from him, Sadie practically vibrating with excitement. Aunt Marlene took the morning off as she wanted to have breakfast with us. Marlene smiled, looking more relaxed than Garrett had ever seen her. I figured it was time I saw what all the fuss was about. These famous Tuesday pancakes. Donna appeared with menus and a knowing smile. The usual for everyone. The usual, Sadie confirmed. But extra bacon for Aunt Marlene. She never eats enough bacon. They ordered, they ate, they talked about ordinary things. School, work, the weather, plans for the summer. The kind of conversation that families have over breakfast when the world isn't ending and the future feels possible. Halfway through the meal, Sadie reached into her backpack and pulled out something small. A photograph in a handmade frame. The frame was covered in glitter and stickers, clearly the work of an 8-year-old with access to craft supplies and strong opinions about decoration. But the photograph inside was perfect. It showed Garrett and Sadie at this very booth taken by Marlene a few weeks ago during one of their regular breakfasts. Garrett was smiling, really smiling. Not the guarded expression he usually wore, but genuine happiness. Sadie grinned up at him, pancake syrup visible on her cheek. I made this for you, Sadie said, for your wallet, so you can remember me when you're not here. Garrett took the frame carefully. Sadie, I don't need a picture to remember you. You're with me all the time. I know, but now I'm with you officially. She pointed at the frame. That's us. That's our friendship. Whenever you look at it, you'll remember that you have a family, that you're not alone anymore. Garrett looked at the photograph for a long moment. Then he opened his wallet and carefully removed the crumpled dollar bill and the old photo of his brother Jimmy. He tucked Sadie's framed picture in beside them. There, he said, the 3 most important things I own, all together. Sadie beamed. What's the third thing? The dollar. Your dollar, the one you gave me that first day. I've kept it ever since. Sadie's eyes went wide. You still have it after all this time? It reminds me, Garrett's voice was rough with emotion. It reminds me that there's still kindness in the world, that someone saw me as human when everyone else saw a monster, that the smallest gesture can change everything. Marlene reached across the table and put her hand over Garrett's. Thank you, she said quietly, for everything. For seeing Sadie when others looked through her, for helping us when you didn't have to, for being exactly who she needed when she needed it most. She saved me too, Garrett said. She just doesn't know it. I know it, Sadie said firmly. We saved each other. That's how it works. That's what family does. Family. The words settled over the table like a blessing. Garrett looked at Marlene, at Sadie, at the photograph now tucked into his wallet beside the dollar and Jimmy's picture. He thought about all the Tuesdays that had brought them to this moment, all the breakfasts and phone calls and Sunday dinners, all the small acts of kindness that had built something larger than any of them could have imagined. Can I ask you something, he said to Marlene. Anything. Will you let me keep showing up not just Tuesdays, whenever you need me, holidays, emergencies, ordinary days when nothing's happening? Will you let me be part of your family? Marlene's eyes filled with tears. You already are, she said. You have been for a while now. We were just waiting for you to realize it. Sadie slid out of the booth and came around to Garrett's side, squeezing in next to him. All the Tuesdays, she said, and all the other days too. That's the deal. Garrett put his arm around her small shoulders. That's the deal. Outside Rosie's diner, Oakland was waking up to another Tuesday morning. Cars passed on Telegraph Avenue. People hurried to work and school and the thousand small destinations that made up ordinary life. The fog had burned off early, leaving the sky clear and blue, the kind of blue that Garrett had once told Sadie was his favorite color. Inside, three people who had found each other, against all odds, sat together over pancakes and coffee, proving that family wasn't about blood or law or what society expected. It was about choice, about showing up, about seeing someone clearly and deciding to love them anyway. Garrett Brennan had spent 42 years building walls, protecting himself from a world that had given him little reason to trust it. He had worn his leather and his ink like armor, keeping everyone at a safe distance. Then a little girl with a crumpled dollar had walked right through those walls like they weren't even there. She had seen him, really seen him, and in seeing him she had changed everything. The breakfast rush continued around them. Donna refilled coffee cups. The kitchen clattered with the sounds of orders being prepared. Life went on in its ordinary, extraordinary way. But at one corner booth, something remarkable had happened. Something that started with an act of kindness and grew into something neither of them could have predicted. A family built from scratch, held together by Tuesday morning pancakes and the unshakable belief that everyone deserves to be seen. Garrett looked at Sadie, at her gap-toothed smile and bright eyes and fierce loving heart. He thought about the dollar in his wallet, still crumpled, still precious, still the most valuable thing he owned. Some people spent their whole lives looking for redemption, looking for proof that they mattered, looking for a reason to believe that kindness wasn't weakness and hope wasn't foolish. Garrett had found his in a diner booth in Oakland in the form of an 8-year-old girl who gave away her last dollar because she thought a stranger needed something warm. He had found his family, he had found his home, and he would spend the rest of his life being worthy of both. The sun climbed higher over Oakland, the morning stretched into afternoon, and somewhere in the city, a man who had once been feared by everyone discovered what it meant to be loved by someone. All the Tuesdays, all the ordinary, extraordinary days, all the moments that made up a life worth living. Garrett Brennan had finally found them all.